My name is William Riley Deno. The story is that my mother told me that the birth certificate was made out to William Deno, and they said, "You have to have a middle name, ma'am." And she said, "I really don't know what it might be, but I'll use my name. Use Riley." So William Riley and Deno, which is a derivation of Deno, it's French, not Italian, didn't fit very well. But even in high school, some of the students began to call me Riley, just on a regular basis. I don't know why. My great-grandfather was a Frenchman who came from the Montreal area with a friend of his that they met along the way. His name was La Liberté, Stephen Etienne La Liberté. He changed his name as soon as he hit northern Idaho to Liberty. And to this day, there's Liberty Lake and Liberty Schools and Liberty this and that. I was born and raised in Spokane, across the border from Coeur d'Alene. And I went to North Central High School. And upon graduation in 1946, I wanted to go to Washington State College in those days, which was at Pullman, Washington. And I was unable to get the cash together to do that. So I went on to an alternate career in the arts and in California, going to a good trade school, learning good craftsmanship in terms of drafting and engineering, arts, and so forth. And when we finally moved to Denver in 1963, I said, it's time to do it. And so in 1963, the car barn was, we called it, was still in existence. The pits where they brought the streetcars over the top. At 14th and Arapahoe is this old beat-up building, which is now a beautiful, what do they call it, a beautiful hotel, you know. And but in those days, it was squeaky floors and drafty classrooms. And that's where I went, where I began in 1963 taking courses so that I could matriculate to Boulder. And it was 1969 when I did that. And 3 years later, a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. So it took me 10 years, but I got the job done. I was bumming around with kids, you know, half my age, and had a good time doing it too. And they accepted me, I accepted them. We worked together very well as students. My first job was with a sign company who did electrical signs, neon signs, and in Spokane, Washington. After I graduated from this Wiggins Trade Technical Junior College, it was called, in Los Angeles. And I was transferred then to Seattle, and then to Billings, and then to Great Falls, or to Salt Lake City, and then or Boise, Salt Lake City, back to Seattle, then Great Falls, then down here. And it was a run during the heyday of neon signs, and I'm beginning to do some research on that. I'd love to write a book about stories about my days in Montana, back in the good old days when neon signs were really meant something. There were gambling on the streets and houses of disrepute, if you want to call them that, and Indians on the street with their squaws, and you know, it was back in those good old days. And when I got to Denver here, I was recruited here by a man named Ed Petrie. I'll never forget him. He was he was a good-looking fellow, and also dressed to the nines. Had a house in Cherry Creek, married to a beautiful French woman, and he knew a lot of people there. Everyone always asked him about Nick Petrie, Petrie Construction Company, and he wasn't afraid to say, "Oh, a distant relative," or something like that, because he really relied on that. He and I designed signs all over Denver at that time during the 1960s. The one that's left that I can point to now is the Brown Palace Hotel. Still has the beveled edges on the letters that's chrome, and they were imported from England. So and it's still there today. What happened was the neon signs reverted to plastic sheets of white plastic up and down the streets, and I said it's time for me to move on to Boulder and get my architecture education started. So that's what I did. My first job as an architect, you mentioned, was I wanted to get some experience, so I'd take anything. So I was traveling to Denver down the Valley Highway, as I called it then, to Colorado Boulevard and worked for a church architect for a while. Then I worked for a group in Denver, in Golden. It was called Intergroup. One of the things I learned there was in doing details, you went to the best man in the office who knew about details. If you were matching wood to metal, you know, or you were an attachment of one kind or another, his name was Wittenweiler. Great name, I always thought. And so you'd wander over to his desk and say, here's what I need to do. I need to fasten this to that. What would you suggest? What do you think, you know? And he'd tell you, you know. So that was something I learned, and something I've done all my life is to work as a team member, always. When my closest team members were always the fellows in the shops. It was the sheet metal man, the electrician, you know, the whomever back there. And I'd go back and tell them what I had designed, what I intended to do, and they would say, it'd be better if you moved this way or that way, or turned it this way, or fastened it a certain way. And so everything I've done throughout my career really has been as in partnership with other people. Then I was interviewed by Everett and Ziegel, and also by the university. And so I had my choice. And at about that time, 1973, things were a little tough. And I thought, well, I'll work for the university for a few years, you know, and ride out this recession in architecture. And never did. And so I started out in the basement of Regent Administrative Center in a drafting board shoved against the wall and an old stool, and worked my way up. Well, I was a student intern, of course, to begin with, but in the spring of 1973, I became a staff member. And I don't really remember the title per se, but I worked with programming, just really, and that's what it was, program plans and programming of all kinds, whether it was writing reports or whether it was actually doing sketches. That was one of the things I learned from Gary Landon, was his name. Gary was a great illustrator, and he said, Bill, be real careful. You're a good illustrator. And he says, I spent half my career trying to get out of that niche, because everybody wanted me to work for them because I could give them ideas, you know, design ideas. And he says, so be careful. He says, they'll hire you for your graphics. And you don't, if you want to do that, fine, but if you want to be a true architect, try to stay away from the graphics. Clowder and his partner, Frank Day, Day and Clowder out of Philadelphia, they were bicycling through Tuscany and saw, this is at the turn of the century, bicycling through Tuscany. People do it today. And they saw some of these abandoned townhouses and farmhouses back there, and were really quite taken by the architecture, and they took a lot of sketches and photographs. And Clowder always pointed out to one photograph of Fiesole, which is right outside Florence. Yeah. And as an inspiration for what came to pass. Frank Day died shortly after they were given their commissions, but before he died, he and Clowder really came to see that to do something in the like the auditorium, you know, in the Gothic style was completely out of character with the setting here, with the mountain backdrop and the weather, the climate, the situation, the terrain, you know, they thought that it really should be something like what they saw in Tuscany. So they brought in a sketch of this new characterization of Tuscany, and the regent said, "Well, I guess it's all right." And the first buildings were done that way, and the first building, you know, was just a mess as far as the governor of the state of Colorado when he came up for the grand opening. And many of the people in Boulder and the faculty did not like it at all. They thought it would look too much like California. And they said, this is not good. 1959, I believe it was, there was discussion about the poor quality of architecture that was coming from the successor firm after Charles Z. Clowder died in 1938, actually. And so it came to pass that the committees and so forth, the people at the top, thought that really the selection of architects should not be a single architect, but should be the architect should be skilled in the type of project that is being offered, and rather than just hiring a single architect that does everything. And that the so-called Tuscan vernacular architecture of Clowder might be modified slightly to handle the different aspects of contemporary materials and building and so forth. And that came out wrong in the press, and all hell broke loose because the alumni first, and then the general public actually said, "What? You're going to get rid of red tile roofs and sandstone walls? That's criminal, you know." And they actually went to the legislature, and the legislature agreed and said, "No, you try to do something with that architecture up there and change it. Oh, no, you can't do that. And we'll pass something that's going to stop it." So at that time, Cal Briggs, architecture professor, went to Italy and did a search of what Tuscan architecture looks like, and came back and said, no, we need to keep this, but it can be changed. It does not to be slavishly copied out of Clowder's notebook. The buildings that were constructed at that time were different, there's no question about it, but they still tipped their hat very nicely to Clowder architecture. And that was one of my issues with all the way up to the top. And I had issues too with external architects from back east and the south and so on, because they would sprinkle into the design some cultural aspects of where they are located. And that happened with the business building, for instance, recently, not too long ago, and others as well I could point out on campus where it's still there, but I'm sure that Charles E. Clowder would frown and, turn his head away. Well, my role is to first of all give the thumbs up or thumbs down before it comes to them, and they've asked me to do that. As campus architect, I was one of these people who said there's no such word as no. Yes, my response to the architects is, yes, you can do that. You could do that. No, you could go ahead and do that. But I'm telling you right now that it's not going to go very far. But so you really should try something else. Oh, so they really work with me until we massage something together. I'm not happy with a lot of it. I'm willing to compromise on a lot of things. Then it goes to the design review board. The design review board's only fault is that the architects oftentimes wear them down. They wear them down. The first presentation is just awful. It is off the mark, And I told them that. You're wasting your time. No, we're going to show it to them and they're going to love it. No, they're not. So then that time has been wasted. Their time has been wasted. Second time, it's looking a lot better. But the design review board is telling them, no, this is bad, that's bad. You got to work on this part. You got to work on that part. Same things I'm telling them. So it's really a difficult procedure to go through. At one time, I instigated an idea where they would actually do a presentation, a preview of what they were going to do at the design review board. Actually, act it out, so to speak. But didn't seem to work either. Every architect that the university hires tries to change that, to test the boundaries. John Prosser and his design review board always said, look, every facade should have 3 ideas, not 4, not 5, not 6. Come on, you guys. And there were people like someone we were mentioning earlier who could be very ornery about such things, who said, I know best, and I know better than Bill Deno, who was first looked at this and said, you're not going to get it by the design review board. I know better, and I am going to take this to the design review board, and they're going to love it. He takes it to the design review board, and they thumbs down all the way. But they just keep hammering away all the time because they think that there is some magic bullet that they have that is going to just be wonderful. Unfortunately, and I'm somewhat sympathetic, unfortunately, we don't have, we have background architecture up there. We really do. And it's hard for star architects, for instance, to say, to come up with something that is truly unique and would stand out. I see too much of that in the architecture magazines, and I shudder. Predoc, I talked with him one time, and he said, I can do this. I can do this architecture. I can do it. And I thought to myself, no, you can't. It's difficult to say. It's like fathering 12 children, and you say, which one do you like best, Which one are you most proud of? I, at one time, sat down and said, I wonder what Clowder would say if he came back and walked the campus and got to looking at each of these buildings. And one, he would say, oh my God, what happened here? Or another one, he'd say, hey, they did a fairly good job. Or another one, he'd say, right on. So I think that could really happen. And I can do that, and I would love to play his role and walk the campus and do that same thing. There are some that are just, should never have happened. Our latest effort in terms of a fine arts building is just awful, I think. Just not very well done at all. And these are, again, star architects in cooperation with the locals. I went to San Francisco one time and talked with one of the largest firms down there and sat in their office for 2 hours telling them that their design is just not going to fly, and will you please stop trying to push this onto the campus and push it onto the design review board. They just couldn't bring themselves to do it. They were dropped. But it's just strange how we as architects get something in our mind that this is the perfect solution, and they've got to like it. It's perfect, and someone tells them, no, it's not quite perfect. It's very hard to accept. First caution I would give is hold fast. Hold fast to your concerns, your predictions, your what you know should be done and what should not be done. Hold fast. Don't let people run over you. You're going to have. I've had deans run over me. I have had chancellors run over me. I have had the president of the university run over me. who was the president of the university who wanted to cover the engineering center with stone? You know, he was serious. You just have to hold, and you can do it because people will respect you more for your opinion if you are strong, if you express strong conditions about it, and are willing to willing to talk about compromise. But you have to hold fast to the principles of what this architecture is supposed to be up here. And you can't go too far to the left or too far to the right. It doesn't have to be right on. You don't want to copy Clowder. But you can certainly go a little this way, a little that way, no problem. But don't let people shove you off to the side here. That is just so important and so hard to do for some. I always say it's the best public university campus, the most beautiful public university campus in the nation. And these campuses are last forever. They're critical, you know, to the lasting enjoyment and the lasting purpose of higher education. And so it's very, very important to maintain that relationship of what I call body and soul, you know, the physical body of the university and its academic spirit. It's very important. And so I've been preaching that for a long time. And the only other thing I have always brought up to anybody who would ask is, again, this is not me personally that is watching over that campus, but it is a number of people, and it's a team effort. And I always said it was a three-legged stool. It's the owner, which is the University of Colorado, and I'm representing them. And it's the architect who is designing the facility and the user. And as long as that three-legged stool maintains those three legs, usually we come up with a pretty good effort.